Thank you, Randy.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. My voice isn't as loud as yours, so I'm going to use the microphone. And a big thank you to Chelsea Gilmore and her team who helped put the show together. And her team includes Sam, Anise, Nick, and Desiree. We appreciate the wonderful opportunity to showcase our Pen Women. A good evening to you all, and welcome to the Modesto Branch of the National League of American Pen Women Art and ekphrastic exhibit. In 1897, when women were not allowed in the press room at the White House or allowed to join press clubs, Marianne Longfellow Donahue, the niece of Henry Longfellow, invited colleagues to join her to form their own press union for women, which grew to include professional women artists, composers, dancers, and later women from related creative professions. After 126 years, we are the oldest women's professional arts organization in the United States. We inspire, encourage, and support creative women with artist in residence programs, national jury shows, contests, and competitions. We publish with the Pen Women Press, recognize members' achievements through social media and websites. We publish professional journals and network through workshops, conferences, and other events. Our local branch, which includes a large area, was established in the 30s, 87 years ago, by Alice Scott Carlson. She was a teacher at Modesto High and also at MJC. Our members are known regionally, statewide, nationally, and internationally, including work at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington. The Pen Arts Building and Art Museum is our headquarters in Washington. It is a historic mansion on DuPont Circle, which hosts public programs, events, and guest stays. We recently have begun a student membership application, and those should be available in the lobby after tonight. If you are interested, women students, please consider joining us. Talk to some of the Pen Women who are here tonight. Tonight, we will hear from our California State Poet Laureate, 4 artists, and 4 writers with work in the exhibit, and our Modesto Poet Laureate. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Lee Herrick. Please join me in welcoming our California State Poet Laureate.
Thank you, Henrietta. It's really wonderful to be here. This is a wonderful turnout, and thank you for inviting me. I was driving up, my wife Lisa and I drove up from Fresno, and as I neared Modesto JC, I was getting increasingly nostalgic because I attended here in the late 1980s. And I took a moment, for MJC? Really, so if there are any students here, you're in good hands, and I wish you all the best. You can do anything from here. And I walked up into Founders Hall and visited my oldest, dearest buddy, who's now a professor here, Optimism 1. And so it's wonderful to see folks. Thank you. I was asked to say a little bit about myself and my influences in Modesto, and then a little bit about the laureateship, and I'll read a poem. So I was adopted from Korea in late 1970, born late 1970, and arrived in San Francisco in October of 1971. And I was adopted into a wonderful family. Some of you, I think, may know that my mom is the amazing artist, I'm biased, Georgia Herrick, who is right here. And I grew up, and she's a part of the National League of American Pen Women, and I grew up just always hearing discussions and questions and ideas about art, whether it was I'm working on a painting, or I want to pull over because there were some mushrooms in a field she wanted to take a picture of. So early on, I realized the value of seeing the world through an artist's lens. And it's not very different from the poet's lens. We see things, we craft ideas, we imagine, and we create. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful space to be in. So thank you for having me. My mom, of course, was a huge influence on me, not just as a poet, but needless to say, as a person, as was my father and my sister who's here, Holly, who's a principal of a school in the area. And so I was, yeah. So, and Modesto, you know, I've lived in Fresno now. I went to Stanislaus Union here after we moved from the East Bay. I went to Stanislaus Union. I went to Prescott. I went to Davis High, which I loved. Yeah. And Modesto JC, and then Stanislaus State. Now I've lived in Fresno now for about 26 years. But anytime I think about Modesto, I think about the artists and the teachers. And so it's very nice to be back. So thank you, Henrietta, for having me. About 3 months ago, I found out after about an 8-month process, going through interviews and some waiting period, that I had advanced, and the governor's office contacted me. So I knew at that point it was very real. And I had an interview with about 6 people from the governor's office, including the chief of staff and the first partner's office, Jennifer Siebel-Newsome. And to make a long story short, I was appointed, and it's been a whirlwind of kindness over the last 3 months. Just in the next 3 or 4 months ahead, I've got something like 40 events, and I'm counting each one as little, as gifts, because I'm seeing a lot of the state, and there's a lot of poetry anywhere you look here. So I also loved the poems and the paintings, and it's great to read with the other poets, and the Modesto Poet Laureate, Sal, is here. He's going to be reading later, so it's a pleasure to be with you also. Yeah, thank you. And Gillian Wegner from the Modesto Stanislaus Poetry Center. This is my last plug, I swear. Just going to read one poem. I thought I'd read a poem that does incorporate an artist or two and a writer or two. This is a poem that was originally started when I was on a flight to the Pacific Northwest, and I started to do a crossword puzzle, and 2 other people had already begun the crossword puzzle, and I started to try to finish it, which I couldn't, but I started to do the crossword puzzle, but it really turned out to be a poem about the people we meet and the places we go and ideas like that. So this is Flight. The in-flight magazine crossword partially done, a corner begun here, scratched out answers there, one set of answers in pencil, another in the green. The woman with the green ballpoint knew the all-time hit king is Rose, and the Siem Reap treasure is Angkor Wat. And the woman, perhaps en route to hold her dying mother's hand in Seattle, forgot about death for 10 minutes while remembering her husband's Cincinnati Reds hat while gardening after the diagnosis. Her handwriting was so clean. Maybe she was a surgeon. Maybe a painter. No. What painter wouldn't know 17 down? Diego's Love, 5 letters. In a rush, her dying mother's voice came back to her. Or maybe she was a Chinese adoptee, and her first mother's imagined voice said, "Wo ai ni." At 30,000 feet, you focus on 33 across. Asian American classic. The woman. When a stranger in the window seat sees the clue, watches me write in W, and she says, "Warrior." And for a moment, you forget it is your favorite memoir. And she reminds you of lilies or roses, Van Gogh or stems with thorns, art galleries and romantic cities where she is headed, but you should not go. The flight attendant grazes my shoulder. The crossword squares, the letters, the chairs and aisles seem so tight in flight, but there's nothing here but room, really. Maybe the next passenger will know what I do not. 64 down, 5 letters, purpose. And why do we remember what we do? We know the buzz of Dickinson's fly and the number of years in Marquez's solitude. But some things we will never know, as it should be. Why the body sometimes rumbles like a plane hurtling over southern Oregon. How exactly we fall in love, or if Frida and Maxine Hong Kingston would have loved the same kind of tea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. That was quite a pleasure to listen to your work, and I think we need to thank your mother for dropping the hint that you might be available. Some of the art and poetry that you see in the gallery is when we pair artists and writers together. And we have used numerous times in different shows ekphrastic method of poetry or prose, which is writing in response to the work of another artist or even in reversed. Tonight we will have an artist speak, followed by a poet who will talk about why they chose that artist and then read their poem or poetry. We're going to start tonight with Chella, an artist, and she is dressed art style tonight to talk about her work.
Well, I thought maybe I would set up, but I'm not going to set up. But I do want to talk about my plein air pieces. Yeah, thank you, Richard. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just thought maybe I'd just come relaxed. Yeah, so, yeah, these are what I take when I go to paint or go by the roadside or find those, you know, those mushrooms. Yeah, so anyway, my first intention was to, when after I retired, that I would just paint out of doors, because that was where I was really very comfortable. So, and I grew up in a farm area, and then I realized here in Modesto, in this area, too, you know, there were farms that were being torn down. Tank houses was going. I had never seen a tank house before, except in Europe. And here they were, in Newman and Gustine, and I found them fascinating, so I started painting them and started, you know, painting buildings or family equipment that I knew was not going to last. So that's why I paint small, 9 by 11 usually, and that's just what I do, and I love to do it. And I don't have much more to say except that's just what I do.
Next, I'd like to introduce to you our letters member, Pat Eggenberger.
Good evening. I was inspired many years ago in the early 60s by Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, which had such an effect on the environmental movement. And since I came to Modesto, I've been very inspired by Linda Knoll, the painter. And so I asked her if I could respond to one of her paintings. And she was going to do Rachel Carson painting. The title of her painting is, let me get this right, Rachel Under the Sea, and it's right there. And she's a very skilled watercolorist, but in this one she gives a sense of depth in it. And so I read, my process was to look at her painting, but also to read the book a couple of times and take notes on it. If you want to get an updated version, because you know how science is always changing, you can, but I had the original one. So this is, I'm a little unstable, so I'm holding on. Rachel Carson paints the sea. Rachel paints the sea, paints the ocean with words that flow through time, depth, breadth of mother of life, the sea, whose tides, currents, and waves create a dance never ending between earth and water. She speaks of sediment, snowfall, blanketing ocean floors in layers like a gargantuan cake mixed of dead life forms, eroded soil, and rocks. Through her voice, we view strange sea creatures who light the depths with their body lamps. We hear squid who fly and land on vessels. We learn of mariners stranded when cold currents collide with warm, of deep-sea canyons, volcanoes that erupt to form islands only to explode and sink under the waves. See her rise here, a woman of vision, scientist of land and sea, immersed in life forms she loved, diatoms floating with fantastic shapes invisible to us. Here bathed in phthalo and cerulean, one a crocheted balloon, another like a ray with turtleback, the third phosphorescent Ferris wheel, all breadbasket of the sea, level one of the chain of life. See the reef with sessile sponges decked out in green, their convoluted bodies feeding in the tides. Coral polyps lift appendages of green, gold, magenta, vermilion. Tiny fishes dart through this ecosystem, flashing vermilion and yellow. Will they eat or be eaten? We think this profusion of life silent, but sea creatures' voices make ghostly moans, shrieks, cackles, sizzles, and snaps. The sea around us and Silent Spring teach the interdependent web of life. We are not masters of creation, but beings among beings, allowed to live for our time of wonder and awe.
Occasionally I write poetry, and one of my pieces in the corner over here, Vicki and I are in the corner. Sometimes we get into trouble, but other times there's good reason for us to be in the corner. So I incised, it was from a series that I did, and I incised the poem in the ceramic sculpture, and it goes around on the back side as well. My work comes from my inner being in response to the world, and I refer to my work as visual poetry. Whether I'm painting landscapes, I try to catch the essence without details and leave the viewer their own metaphoric interpretation. Painting plein air gives the composition vibrance and life. When you're working on location, you get a sense of movement, of place, and the conditions. When you capture scenes that change over time, it allows the observer an opportunity for that which changes and is not always constant, and reminds us to be stewards of our land and nature that is often taken for granted. When I do figurative work with a live model, there's a different tempo in composing the human landscape. When you relay the sculpture of the human form and capture the personality, the elements come together in a soulful expression that requires one's own personal introspection and understanding of the human circumstance and what made that person. Abstract work, I always explain to my students, because sometimes people have trouble with abstraction. Abstraction gives us license to turn reality inside out. It allows us to form an introspective improv. You have to seize the matter and separate the fundamentals from irrelevance, and that's what I have created in painting in my monoprinting series. As an artist, my work covers a range of media, from ceramic sculpture, printmaking, watercolor, cast bronze, painting, and mixed media. I like to work in different mediums as well as subject matter, and often in my abstract work, I can say things that respond to culture, to morals, to politics, and to give it a different meaning in ways that causes people to think. I find that working in different mediums gives a method of communicating that transposes into another a visual message that becomes richer with time. My art explores a personal timbre, and through my eyes, may you discover your own perception and meaning. Next, I would like to introduce Louise Cantrow.
When I first saw Henrietta Sparkman's Headlands, which is over on that wall, it spoke to my inner teacher of literature. For many years, I taught the book All Quiet on the Western Front. And one of the most poignant scenes in the book has to do with horses. So her painting is entitled Headlands, and mine is Headlands in Monterey. In World War I, the soldiers learned not to make noise, no matter how bad the wound. But the horses, knowing only fear and pain, writhing in agony, screamed out their terror. A pitiable sight it is to see a collapsed horse. Without swift medical intervention and healing hands, he might never again rise. The Headlands formation in Monterey, shaped like a horse's head and neck, shows the horse giving, as he has for centuries, to those who use him to forge a path for themselves, a monument of his valiance and devotion. And I'm not going to read this whole second poem, but I couldn't leave Vicki Boise's fabulous sculpture here out. I wrote in response to this beautiful piece, Rooftop Ruth. And I guess what struck me when I saw it was the whimsy. The whimsy. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was known to be quiet and serious, but she had another side. So I decided I needed to do a kind of a biographical take. Now, this is a 6-stanza poem. It's rather long. I'm not going to read it all. I'm only going to read the first stanza and the last stanza. So there's a lot in between about her life, okay? Sit up straight, little Kiki. You are free to jump across garage roofs with the boys, but be sure you keep up with your studies. Act like a lady, learn independence. Make us proud, little Kiki. And then the last one. Stretch out your arms, aging Ruthie. Your goal always for consensus. You are now a vocal dissenting voice. When Marty dies, so do parts of you. But you find your smile and some whimsy. Embrace being notorious RBG. You work out, survive cancer twice, find solace and joy in opera. Stretch out your hands, beloved Kiki, Ruth, mother, Bubba, friend. The world is not yet fair, but your rooftop leaps bring us closer.
Next, I'd like to introduce Sally Ruddy.
Good evening. I work in oil paint, and this evening, everyone has been asking me to tell them what's the deal with the pink house. That's the big painting on the wall there. So if you haven't seen it, take a peek before you go. So I thought I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about this piece here. Well, the pink house is no ordinary house. It appeared overnight. It was kind of like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and a big tornado came and set down a house, because I drive down Highway 132 all the time from my home in Waterford, and I had never seen this house in 40-some years. And one day, it was there. The owners of the property bulldozed down their orchard and took out their trees, and it was like, wow, there's a pink house in there. So now it's been a few years, and the pink house has slipped from view behind new trees planted in the orchard once again. I just felt I must paint that house before it disappeared. And the other piece is this one right here. It's called Shining Bright Before Night, and somehow night got left off. It says Shining Bright just before. I'm supposed to say night. But maybe that makes it more interesting. But you know, we've all seen moments like this where a tree captures the last light of day, the birds are gathered for the night, the sun gives a brilliant flash just before their bedtime. I actually saw this image from Rayleigh's parking lot in Turlock. So I had to draw a lot from imagination because there's a limited time for this last little bit of light. And so I painted the birds red because I just like them against the cerulean blue background. I don't really know what color they were because I couldn't see. But anyway, that's that one. And I just want to finish by saying there is really so much magic in the world if you just pay attention.
Next, Letters member, Lynn Hansen.
I have to say, I'm thrilled to be in front of RBG, you know what I mean? And Lee, Herrick, Modesto loves you too. There's I'm involved with an extended poetry community, and whenever your name is mentioned, the word "he's the most gracious human I know" comes out. So there you go. Modesto loves you. So my artist is a caregiver for her husband and couldn't be here tonight. Her name is Ann Williams Bailey, and it's an interesting thing because when we were going to work together, the normal situation for ekphrastic poetry is, or ekphrastic work, is that the photographer or the artist presents their work and the writer looks at it and reflects on it. This time, I was so pleased because she looked at my poem and did a painting, which is just the opposite. Yay! At first, that's the first time that has ever happened for me because I've been in several ekphrastic exhibits. And anyway, I was really pleased. And her picture is acrylic on canvas, and it's around the other corner, but I wanted you to see it anyhow in front of me, so here it is. This is it. It's called Hunting Magic. And she also has another one, which is right here. And this is the autumn color. It's a photograph on metal. She's very, very creative with all kinds of things. She does sculpting, she does painting, she does photography. She's just an amazing person. And she's a writer, yes. And I told her, she emailed me this afternoon and said, I'm going to be with you tonight, and so she's here in spirit with me, and I just love that. So this is the poem that she painted the picture to. It's one of my very best poems ever. It's called, and it was a poem that I wrote after visiting the Coso petroglyphs in the Riverside area, the Ridgecrest area, and you have to go on the Naval Air Base with the weapons depot there, and you have to go through a lot of security and whatever. And so we went into this canyon, and there are all these ancient petroglyphs. And so this is my poem written in response to that visit. Coso petroglyphs. In Renegade Canyon, wall images appear simple, pounded in the patina of basalt. Grooves hammered by shamans into rock fabric are weathered by the elements, graven. Stick figures with spherical heads wearing ceremonial costumes, geometric patterns, elaborate medicine bags, antelope, scorpion, snake, and desert bighorn sheep emerge and disappear with slant of light as if carved in black velvet. Each design embodies mystery, vision quest revelation, tribal boundary marker, hunting magic. But in this desert stillness, I hear a thrumming, rock strike on rock, a working rhythm, an absolute focus of ancient artists that ricochets along the canyon gallery. Feel shivers of reverence as I walk back in time, listening. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Linda Sawyer, an artist, and her work is appropriately placed for her talking.
It's like old home week. I see so many wonderful faces that I remember from the past. I was surprised to see so many of my work right here. I was going to talk a little differently, but maybe I'll just kind of talk about some of my work right and stand here. This piece up here, I did it at UC Davis in 1957, and I'm still standing. Roland Peterson was the artist teacher, and it was his first year. He had been hired because he had studied with Hayter, Hayter, in Paris, and one of the great printmakers of, in that era. And so I was really excited to learn from him. So this is a triptych from one what am I trying to say? Copper plate. It was copper in those days, but they don't do that anymore because copper is so expensive. So they use zinc. But anyway, I did 3 different ideas there. One with the blue, and the middle is the regular print, and then I did it with the black by trying not to get the ink in where I had etched to make the white stand out. So it was just recently that I realized I could do that and frame it. I had them in my drawer for years, but it was kind of fun to put it together after all those years, So it's one of my kind of favorite things. These 2 prints I hand-colored, and I did that at Stanislaus State. And Chella, do you remember that summer when there were 10 of us and we were invited to come and make something?
Yeah, we made a little booklet.
10.
Sally was in that.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really fun. And so Tom, my husband, and I had been to France, and I had been drawing and doing watercolors. And so I came back and used my drawing on the etching there, and then I just felt like I needed some color, so I painted the window, and I also wrote a poem about it. So these are 2 from that period of time. Let's see, what will I do next? I like to paint the figure, and sometimes the only figure is yourself, you know what I mean? Where is anybody else? So these are, well, the 3 anyway, are self-portraits. The one up a little bit was done in 1997 when the flood came through, and I was really upset because my kids were living across the river and they couldn't get across the river because the bridge went out. So she's looking a little bit sad there, I think. And then the other one is a little later when I turned gray. And this is also later. That's called Favorite Sweater. And that one was done kind of quickly and loosely and a little bit different from what I usually do. But sometimes you can be at a certain point and just say it's finished, even though maybe somebody else might not think so. But anyway. And then this is one of the few collages I've done. And I got to the point where I was just going to finish the mouth, and it just wasn't working, and I was tearing it apart, and pretty soon I couldn't do anything with it except put a flower like Magritte might. So that's that one. And then, some of you know that I live on a bluff and look down over the Tuolumne River basin there. And so I like to do a lot of scenes around the place. So this is a monoprint where I did the drawing on a glass, and then I turned the paper on and kind of went like that. And then it's kind of a surprise when you pull it up because sometimes it looks pretty ugly. But I did notice that Matisse did a couple. And so when I saw that his didn't look much different than mine, I thought, that's just the way it goes. And the last one over there is the one with the red hat and the colorful boxes and things. And I did that. I took a class from Richard Savini at Stanislaus State in 19 89. And that's oil. And I found I'm kind of allergic to oil and solvents, so I now paint in acrylic. So anyway, thank you, and great to see everybody.
Last but not least is Nancy Haskett.
So I came intending to read just one poem. But then I decided it only takes a minute, so I probably could read the other one, but now I'm going to look like my grandkids and read it off my phone, So it goes with this painting and collage over here of the woman suffragist, if you can see that. And I did that with Chella, and I believe we did it in 2020 because of the 100th anniversary of women getting the vote, right? So my poem is called True Colors. Their struggle endures in images black and white, without nuance of depth and hue. We picture them in white dresses, white shoes and hats, forget their strength of diversity, white women and women of color, as they march together from varying backgrounds. The educators and students dressed in green, artists in pale rose, writers in purple. We cannot see in one photograph the long history of their dedication as they continued to march. Close to their hearts, they wore sashes and rosettes of white, purple, and yellow to represent the purity of their cause, their loyalty to one another, the hope and optimism that they would prevail, that things would change, that they would finally become equal citizens. Courageous and determined, they showed their true colors, carried signs and banners, risked arrest and derision, just as we still do now as we stand with our sisters, march arm in arm for equality today and into the future. Thanks. So the second poem goes with a painting that's on the far wall, and it was painted by an artist in our branch named Carol David. And maybe Henrietta knows this, but Carol passed away 1 year ago tomorrow. March 3rd. So she's been gone a year, and we miss her very much. She was in our branch since 2005. And at one time she served as our branch president. And I had done this poem to go with her painting that was exhibited down at the Carnegie in Turlock when our whole branch did an ekphrastic. And so I'll read it to you. Her painting on the far wall is called Autumn Aspens, and my poem is called Autumn Burning. In November, Sierra Nevada forests celebrate the end of fire season with a conflagration of color. Burnt orange, blazing red, incandescent yellow leaves flare and flash, an explosion of brilliance against a backdrop of evergreens. A showy performance for an intimate audience now that summer crowds have vanished. The paved path through the meadow leads to a bridge over water that trickles around exposed granite boulders, no longer a deafening roar. During this annual interlude, there is a stillness. A quiet breeze floats a kaleidoscope of bright leaves that swirl, fall, crunch beneath our feet, turn to ashes. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Sal Salerno. Please join me in welcoming our Modesto Poet Laureate.
a marvelous evening. Let's give a hand for Henrietta and Chelsea. Okay, I'm not going to speak extempore because, for me at least, if you want to get it right, you want to say it right, you write it down. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we woke up every morning and had a script handed to us, and that way we wouldn't have to screw up? On the Poet Laureate, I know you can hear me back there, right? What is a Poet Laureate? What's expected of someone in that position? When I was appointed, my first thought was, okay, I know it's an honor. And my second thought was, but now what is there for me to do? Several of my laudatory poems were published in Modesto View, and I have read a few poems during a few public occasions, but enough about me. That's it. I'd rather remark on the origins of the laureate, its continuance, and what I believe is the poet's role in society. The origin of the poet laureate is rooted in classical antiquity. The ancient Greeks would conduct poetry contests, and the winners would receive garlands of laurel leaves, which they would wear at an awards ceremony. Sounds somewhat familiar. The Romans, being admirers and sometimes imitators of the Greeks, perpetuated that custom. The first English poet laureate was John Dryden, who was appointed by Charles II in 1668. Dryden was paid annually with a cask of Spanish wine and a stipend of 200 pounds. So Lee, call the governor and see where is my shipment of wine. Forget about the money. Here in the U.S., the Library of Congress established a position of poetry consultant from 1937 to 1984, and that title changed to U.S. Poet Laureate, with Ada Limon as the 24th and the most recent office holder. There is also a National Youth Laureate, most notably occupied by Amanda Gorman, who recited The Hill We Climb at President Biden's inaugural on January 20th, 2021. Remember that? What a moment that was. Here in California, the Poet Laureate is chosen by the governor and approved by the Senate. The first laureate in the state was Ina Donna Coolbrith in 1915. Originally, the sinecure was for life, but that was later changed to a 2-year term. Lee Herrick is only the 11th Poet Laureate of California to hold that honor over a span of 108 years. Incidentally, this position is nearly nationwide, with 46 states and the District of Columbia having their own laureates. Massachusetts doesn't have one. What's up with that? Strange. Look it up. Here in Modesto, the position was created in 1993 by the Culture Commission, which recommends candidates, and the Modesto City Council, which approves of the laureate, who shall, quote, present original poems at various official occasions. I look back with fond respect at the previous laureates. Gillian Wegener is Gillian? Gillian Wegener, Stara Baratlis, Ed Bearden, Sam Pierstorff, Debbie Lloyd, Arlene Matos, and Jeanette Mino. All but the first poet have had 4-year tenures. So, what do poet laureates actually do? Poets laureate, excuse me. Some take the initiative to create opportunities, publishing their work locally and searching for spaces for their voices to be heard. Others offer themselves to the community, await requests, and write specifically to emergent occasions. A very few, nobody here, present company accepted, not you, someone else. Very few consider the title as recognition for prior achievements and may literally sit on their laurels. As the duties of a laureate are infrequent and sometimes amorphous, all paths are correct. It's all good. Now, I'd like to address my fellow poets, both untitled and titled. Remember always our noble heritage. We are the latest wordsmiths in that ancient, revered lineage of bards, storytellers, and troubadours. We don't possess the genius of Sappho or Homer, of Whitman or Dickinson, or the illustrious legions of our forebears, but we share their passion and their love for the glory of powerful language. Writing and sharing poetry are always valuable endeavors, always. We are the torchbearers of eloquent expression. Shine the light of your gift and continue on with the singing line. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal, for your kind words and reading. This was a team effort, and our thanks go to Chelsea for the invitation for the Pen Women to be visible in the community and to allow more people to know about who we are and what we do. Thank you, Chelsea.
To lift this up because I'm so tall. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight. My deepest regret for not being able to be here. I'm really hoping human cloning is going to come and get figured out pretty soon. That would make my life a lot easier. But thank you to all the poets and the artists that made this show possible. It's been an amazing turnout. This is such an important show for our students to see the artwork and the poetry, especially as we lead into the 46th annual Celebration of the Humanities, which will be our next show and our next group of young artists that we will bring into Modesto. So thank you again all for coming. We hope to see you again. So thank you all very much.